Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional from Pune, India, Mr. Raman Nanda. Raman, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. What a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Raman is an educator, he's a business and happiness coach, and he's a growth evangelist. He is the founder of Step Transformations Private Limited, which is focusing on business and leadership growth through transformation. So, Raman, my first question before we get into more details is that you've held leadership roles across CFO, CHRO, CMO, CEO positions. How did this multidisciplinary journey shape your approach to business and leadership?
It's an interesting question. The opportunity to work, you can say, in the weeds in all these functions was a very, very different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Working in finance, looking at, in the olden days, tallying the trial balance, right up to getting the accounts audited by the Pricewaterhouse senior partners, to seeing the solvency and liquidity ratios, moving to HR, looking at retention, recruitment,
Mm-hmm.
learning and development, and in marketing and sales, creating business opportunities, building business from Tokyo in Japan to
Mm-hmm.
Detroit in the US,
Yeah.
because I was, focusing on the automotive OEMs,
Mm.
and there are, handful of them, just 20, 30 of them make up 80, 90% of the,
Sure.
Google business.
Mm.
So it was very, very different exposure in
Mm.
each of them. And the outcome is that it helps me connect the dots, because no business problem is a one function problem.
Mm-hmm.
Or to increase market share, maybe you need technology, you need to look at your product, you need to look at better distribution, you need to upgrade your people, or you want to fight competition.
Mm.
So in all key business challenges, it's always a multifunctional approach that's required.
Right.
So I think that's an unfair advantage I have over many people,
Mm-hmm.
that I could work in these functions, and I'm able to put that knowledge together to work with the team and come out with some really creative, different solutions.
Fascinating. Fascinating. And then, after so many years in the corporate world, you decided to transition to mentoring and coaching. What was the inspiration?
So I would say there were some push and pull factors.
Mm-hmm.
The same company for 10 years, I had taken the business in less than 7, 8 years, about 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
The same boss, and so on. So I thought I have had enough opportunity in the corporate world, and there's a shelf life, in every position that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So those you can say were the push factors. The pull factors were much stronger in terms of, as I said, my unfair advantage of having worked in different functions.
Right.
What I could bring to the table in terms of mentoring, coaching people on business, on leadership, I thought I had a great opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my close friends recommended that I could become a coach. So I sat for a couple of exams for becoming a leadership coach, for becoming a life coach and an executive coach. And I never looked back after that. And
Mm-hmm.
like that, opportunities came for me in the teaching field, where suddenly Flame University was short of one faculty.
Mm-hmm.
And in 15 days' time, they asked me to start a course with having 30 sessions of 1 hour each without any content being available. And I
Mm-hmm.
just jumped at it because I thought teaching would be great fun.
Yeah.
So these are things
Very
happening, you
interesting.
can say, by serendipity.
Yeah, and you had a fantastic life. I mean, the kind of experiences you have. And when I was reading about you, there are so many areas that we could have spoken about, but we picked two areas to talk to you about. One is how do you handle difficult conversations, and the other is achieving personal and professional mastery.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the first topic, which you are an expert on, which is how to handle difficult conversations. And my first question in this area, Raman, is why do difficult conversations often get avoided in leadership roles?
I think it's not just in leadership roles, it's in life itself.
Correct.
Most of us are conflict avoidant. We avoid conflict for multiple reasons. Sometimes we are not prepared. sometimes we're not trained, sometimes we want to avoid damaging relationships, is what we
Hmm.
feel. Sometimes we wish that the problem would just go away.
Hmm.
There are people who say, hey, just sit on the problem and maybe it vanishes. There
Hmm.
are multiple reasons in life and in leadership, but the major ones are that we want to avoid breaking or damaging relationships.
Right.
And second, we are not prepared. We have not built that muscle
Hmm.
in ourselves to do that with a good intent.
Hmm.
Difficult conversation is not about creating a difficulty in your relationship.
Hmm.
It's actually about taking short-term actions which will give you long-term peace
Very
and long-term
interesting.
effectiveness.
Very well said. But yet, when it comes to conversations between people who are your subordinates and people who are your superiors, the power dynamics changes.
Yeah.
How should one handle power dynamics in such difficult conversations, especially when you're talking to authority figures or juniors?
I think when you talk about talking to authority figure, you are the authority figure and you got juniors.
Hmm.
I think the first thing is to give them psychological safety
Hmm.
and to share with them gradually, build the trust, build the rapport, build a relationship based on which they feel that feedback truly is a gift that
Hmm.
you're looking for.
Hmm.
In that case, you'll find they are more amenable to listening to what you're saying.
Hmm.
Normally, people are intimidated, especially in the Indian context, where hierarchy and seniority are overplayed and
Hmm.
overemphasized.
Hmm.
On the other hand, when you're talking to your boss or somebody senior, I would say two simple things are you need to be prepared and you need to be respectful. When I'm saying you need to be prepared is talk about the common objectives of the organization or the function where maybe you're reporting to someone.
Hmm.
Look at those based on facts. What is it you want to say? What is it you want to bring the table? You're
Hmm.
trying to make the boss more successful, and in the
Correct.
process, you also become successful. At
Right.
the same time, find the right space where you want to talk to him or her and be respectful. But
Hmm.
respectful does not mean mincing your arguments. You may mince some
Hmm.
words
Hmm.
so that
Hmm.
the other person is more comfortable with what you're saying,
Very well said.
but you didn't need not shy away from saying what needs to be said.
Hmm. And it's often said, and you've worked with so many different companies, there's a cultural nuance that
Yeah,
also impacts a conversation.
sure.
So when you're working for a large American multinational, it can be straight in your face. When you're working for maybe an Eastern corporation, it may not be so.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your perspective on what are some of the cultural nuances in the Indian context.
I think we are all trained from childhood to be respectful authority,
Hmm.
and I think we carry it a bit too far. We carry respect so much that a lot of things are put under the carpet.
Hmm.
You don't say that. So therefore, there is an emphasis on relationship, on hierarchy, and on harmony.
Hmm.
Sometimes more than what's required.
Yeah.
But we can't wish away the fact that we are in the Indian context. So therefore, I always suggest that we keep there is something called non-violent communication where
Hmm.
you always talk about what's the impact on you rather than blaming or accusing the other person of what they are doing.
Hmm.
So that's always a good way to start that I'm concerned or I'm frustrated rather than saying your actions are making me frustrated.
Hmm.
So there are very simple techniques like non-violent communication, giving respect to the authority, but again, remaining focused on the goals.
Hmm.
So you don't challenge directly the people, but definitely you build a rapport and then you obviously have to put the facts on the table that
Hmm.
this is where we are going today. This is the situation. And for the good of the organization, for the good of the team, for the good of all the team members, these are some changes that I would like to suggest.
Hmm. Very interesting. And Raman, how can leaders prepare themselves emotionally and mentally before engaging in a tough conversation? And I'm using the word tough as compared to difficult.
Okay. I think it's important. that leaders build more and more
mm,
self-awareness. You must understand your style. You must have, as the Bhagavad Gita says, uh, awareness of your two selves.
mm,
One is a self which is the doer, and one is a self which is the observer, which is observing you as you go about in your life. So the first is self-awareness based on that observation. So you must know, hey, what are the hot buttons on which I'm likely to lose my temper, and I
mm,
better be careful when I'm getting into a tough conversation, because a cool mind is essential. A cool mind. Second, curiosity. Often our understanding of the facts is different from that of the other person.
mm,
So the curiosity to know what is the reality is really important.
mm,
Third, I would say is the intent. Your intent is not to corner the person who you think has made a mistake. I
mm,
think your intent is that you want to make sure if
mm,
that person has done something, you help that person correct it,
mm,
him or her become better. So I would say self-awareness, your your intent, and your curiosity are starting points whenever you want to have a tough conversation. But
mm.
never lose sight of the objective.
Correct.
The objective of the tough conversation has to be a good objective. So I always say there are three reasons when you should have a difficult conversation. One is when you want to learn something, second is when you want to share something, and third is when you want to solve for an issue. So keep
Mm.
that in mind as your intent.
Fascinating. You also do a work with family-run businesses.
Yeah.
How do you approach an emotionally charged atmosphere or an emotionally charged topic with logic and care without having the challenge of a difficult conversation?
Well, it's not easy because in families there is years of history and baggage.
Mm.
Somebody was not invited to a wedding, somebody didn't get the appropriate
Yeah.
gift, somebody was
Mm.
not called early enough, etc., etc. Besides things happening on the business front, and
Mm.
the two get mixed up.
Mm.
So therefore, it is a cocktail of emotions. It's a cocktail of baggage which you have to be mindful of.
Mm.
At the same time, I think the principles are similar. I always say we are here for three reasons. A, we want to increase the family wealth.
Mm.
B, we want to maintain the family image.
Mm.
Third, we want to have harmony in the family. So I
Mm.
think if we have these three common objectives understood by everyone,
Mm.
then depending on the situation, I think it's important to appreciate and acknowledge people's emotions.
Mm.
At the same time, ask them to put on a different hat if required. A
Right.
father and son debating, don't put on the father hat that you are the boss and the father, whatever you say, the son will listen. No,
Mm.
you are putting on the hat of managing director
Mm.
as the father, and your son maybe is the vice president. So he's
Mm.
putting the hat of a vice president. So, what is the business issue involved that we want to discuss if it's a family business?
Mm.
Then I think more sanity comes into the picture. And
Mm.
often in these situations, Ashutosh, it's important there's an outsider who's objective, who's
Right.
not aligned to anyone
Mm.
except to the solution,
Mm.
who's present with them and helps them start the conversation.
Very
Often
nice.
the conversation has not been had for a long time.
Mm.
You need an outsider, unbiased, with an intent of helping the family, with an
Mm.
intent of solving the issue, who
Mm.
comes in and steps in to diffuse and gradually take them towards a solution.
Amazing. Great response. One more question relating to difficult conversation, then we'll move to another topic. Can you, for my viewers and listeners, give us an example, without any names, of course, of a difficult conversation you handled that transformed a professional relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's so many difficult conversations one has had in one's life.
Yeah.
There's no option. I always say, without difficult conversations, there is zero growth.
Mm.
So therefore, if you want to grow in life, be ready for difficult
Yeah.
conversation and build the muscle for that.
Mm.
But one thing stands out, it was uh, slightly early on in my career. I was CFO in a company in Calcutta,
Hmm.
and I had a head of accounts working with me who had a team of six, seven people, very
Mm.
competent CA, and you can say a person who was a go-getter. At the same time, his being a bit abrasive, to put it mildly, was not liked by
Mm,
the team, and
mm,
we were experiencing attrition. And in those days, or even now, attrition of people, is hard to manage. So I observed for a period of, for 5 months, and then
mm,
I had to step in, and I, called him aside, and we had a nice chat where I shared with him that I really appreciate his professional acumen. I
mm,
really appreciate the way he's dedicated to meeting the timelines of getting audit done and so on and so
mm,
forth. At the
mm,
same time, I gave him three, four very concrete instances of where he had ticked off somebody in public,
mm,
which could have been easily done in private. I mean, he
mm.
had access to a meeting room where he could sit and, discuss with that person
Yeah.
and share whatever he had to say. My intent was to improve him. My
Mm.
intent was to retain him. My intent was to encourage him to keep doing professionally well,
Right.
but at the same time, carry the team with him. So he
Amazing.
was almost in tears at the end, saying, "Sir, no one has told me this so far in life,
Mm.
and I'm sure it's going to be very useful. I'll try to improve." It still took him more than 3, 4 months to actually
Yeah.
start changing and for his team to start realizing. But I
Mm.
think it was a useful intervention looking back.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Raman, from talking about difficult conversations, now let's move to achieving personal and professional mastery.
Yeah.
And that's another area that you got a lot of expertise in. Let me start by asking you, how do you define personal and professional mastery in today's world?
Yeah, I mean, it's evolving. Even the definition will keep evolving.
Yeah.
But I would say personal mastery is when you have a mix of great self-awareness
Mm.
and you are gunning for achieving your full potential.
Mm.
It's often a case, including mine. I didn't know that I could teach till an opportunity came and I tried my hand at it. And I learned in the beginning, I surely made mistakes. But by the time I went back second year to Flame University, I thought I had improved a lot. So coming back, self-awareness and fully your potential being achieved for
Mm.
me is self-mastery
Mm.
on expertise, on skills in a balanced way.
Mm.
Coming to professional mastery, there's no option in today's world but to meet your numbers. There's
Yeah.
no option in today's world to tick many, many boxes, whether it's your skills, your attitude, your knowledge. So I would say the two for me are very much intertwined,
Mm.
interconnected.
Mm.
If you are focused on your personal mastery, it's very often likely that you'll achieve professional mastery as well because
Mm.
the mindset is similar. The mindset is that of a growth mindset.
Right.
Mindset is that of a learning mindset.
Mm.
Mindset is that of a action. Life rewards action.
Mm.
So the two things for me are when I, take sessions with the corporate in the corporate world for teams and so on. For me, the two are almost two sides of the same coin.
Mm.
So I hope I've answered your
Yeah,
question.
you have, you have. But a follow-up question to that is, how does one build resilience while pursuing mastery in a VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world?
I think each of us has to figure out our own strategy
Correct.
for building resilience.
Mm.
But the fact is that we have reached a particular place in life based on our various, you can say, achievements or goals that, or the hills that we have climbed.
Mm.
So I think while you may be hit by missiles in a VUCA world, all kinds of missiles hit us every day,
Mm.
whether it's the resignation of a team member or whether it's, customs duties from the Trump administration.
Mm.
I think it's important to, first of all, have your self-awareness and self-belief.
Mm.
I think that's the starting point. The second, I believe always in having a group of mentors. For different areas of my life, I have
Mm.
different mentors. So, getting a bandwidth so that you can actually discuss the current issue with the right
Mm.
mentor. And you, as I said, for different parts of your life, you may like to have different mentors. And third, I think, are very simple practices like, being grateful, meditating, spending some time
Yeah.
with yourself. We are all too busy with our devices, and in a VUCA world, you are always on a treadmill and a to-do list, which is like never ending. I
Correct.
always say step back, reflect, and that gives you more strength.
Mm.
And if things become too bad, There's nothing wrong with going for therapy.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with consulting an expert. Just like your physical fitness, you go to
Mm.
a gym trainer. If you have, if you're lacking mental fitness, you go to someone who can help you on the
Correct.
front.
Correct. Correct. And in a digital world, how can professionals say deeply reflective and mindful?
Oh, that's hard. That's hard. That's hard for anyone.
Hmm.
As we know, notifications keep coming at us from various directions.
Mm.
There are calls coming, there are mails coming, and so on and so forth. So
Mm.
it's important to take charge of your life, I believe,
Mm.
because at the same time, you have the digital world sort of attacking you. You also have to look at your own physical and mental wellness,
Yeah.
and you have to spend time with your other stakeholders like family,
Mm.
friends, and so on and so forth.
Mm.
So I think it helps first to be aware as to, for example, how many hours you are spending,
Mm.
uh, keeping time aside, like blocking a time aside every day. I like to spend at least 2 hours every day without any devices. And, heavens don't fall if you don't
Mm.
look at your phone for 2 hours.
Mm.
Let me also concede I'm not able to hold for more than 2 hours.
Mm.
So there is a
Mm.
there is a
Yeah.
pressure I am also under. And also keeping some boundaries at dinner table, at in the living room, and couple of other places where or you're having meal with friends. I think just focus on being
Yeah.
mindful,
Yeah.
on being what is being done and being enjoyed in the present. We should sort of compromise on that.
Very interesting. Very well said. And another, challenge I've often seen a lot of young professionals face is how do they handle the tension between ambition and contentment?
There is a very nice way of looking at life, which is
Mm.
that uh, you need to be agile sometimes, you need to be slow sometimes.
Mm.
So I would say you need to be using your intelligence, maybe your IQ sometime,
Hmm.
your EQ sometime.
Mm.
So living with ambiguity is a trait that I think leaders are able to gradually develop. It took me a
Mm.
long time to try to develop that.
Mm.
I think it's possible to have both ambition and contentment.
Mm.
You have to be ambitious to achieve the goals that you would like to achieve. At the same time, what's the use of achieving those goals if you
Yeah.
don't enjoy them? You
Mm.
don't take time to step back and say, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I have done a lot. And you can compare not with the outside world, but what you were a year back or 2 years back or 5 years back.
Mm.
So there are different ways of comparison. So I would say it's possible. It
Mm.
takes building your muscle of reflecting and saying, hey, these are my boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm very happy. I'm enough. What I've achieved is enough. Doesn't
Mm.
stop me from achieving more, but it's also at the same time
Correct.
giving me fulfillment and
Yeah.
contentment.
Yeah. Yeah. Great response. Raman, I have time for two more questions. What, in your view, are the mind shifts essential to achieve mastery at different stages of our careers?
Yeah, great question, Ashutosh, because uh, the same tactics and strategy and policy won't work.
Correct.
So I would say when you're a beginner, it's a learning mindset that you need to have.
Right.
You need to be picking up all kinds of skills. I remember my mom sent me for a typing class when I finished class 11.
Mm.
She said, just keep adding skills,
Yeah.
learn this, learn a musical instrument. So I'm just saying learning skills in the beginning of your career is so important because
Mm.
when you get into the midlife or mid-career, I would say at that time you move from learning mindset to a growth mindset.
Mm.
That's I would call it the middle phase of one's life.
Mm.
And you are, growing your business, you're growing your family, you're growing your wealth. So
Mm.
you're in a huge growth phase at that time.
Yeah.
I think when you reach the third phase, I think you are then trying to reflect and build a legacy. I
Mm.
would say that's a phase when you are actually trying to build whatever you can in your company, in the
Mm.
society, anywhere else, and you're leaving a legacy for yourself. So,
Mm.
learning, growing, and leaving a legacy would be the mindsets I would
Mm.
say at these three broad parts of your life.
Very interesting. Very well analyzed. And my last question for you, Raman, for the many people who will listen to our conversation. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone seeking a long-term impact in both life and work?
I think it's important that we do the right things and we look at significance of whatever we are doing rather than the importance or rather than the you know the shiny world that we live in. I
Hmm.
think it's important that we focus on that. I have believed that you keep doing good work, you keep doing work which has an impact. That is far more important than
Hmm.
looking smart. So, looking smart is good up to a point, but doing something significant is something which stays with you
Yeah.
and with the world for a very long time.
Hmm. And on that note of doing something significant that stays with you and the world for a long time, Raman, thank you so much for speaking to me. What an amazing journey you've had.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing some of the interesting milestones of your journey. What was absolutely fascinating were the two topics we covered. Difficult conversations. You're clearly an expert in this area. You gave us some great pointers, and also to achieve personal and professional mastery. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh, for inviting me. It was fun talking to you. Great questions and great preparation. I like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.